The divinity of Jesus is a central and deeply significant concept in Christianity, but, in the context of spiritual and philosophical texts, the approach to his divinity gains nuances and depth, particularly with the influence of Spiritism. Based on the work of André Luis and the influences of other spirits such as Humberto de Campos, Jesus is recognized not only as the Son of God, but as a highly evolved spirit, sent to earth with a mission of teaching and transformation. He is a supreme example of divinity understood as an expression of spiritual evolution, not just in the sense of being the Son of God in a literal way, but as someone who reaches a degree of spiritual perfection. Within this spiritist line of thought, Jesus' divinity is not restricted to his traditional theological conception of Son of God, but rather as a manifestation of a cosmic and superior spirit, a pure consciousness that represents the closest possible approximation to the divine plan. He would not only represent the image of God in human terms, but also a model for human beings of how to achieve a high level of spiritual evolution. Jesus is described as the ultimate model of love and compassion. Your mission is not just to teach doctrines, but to exemplify in your own life the universal laws of love, truth, humility, and forgiveness. His own conduct is a manifestation of his divinity, because it reflects in action the attributes that Spiritism considers to be the highest for human beings: unconditional love, unlimited forgiveness, and the search for divine justice. Through the practice of loving enemies, forgiving without restriction, and welcoming everyone, Jesus teaches that true divinity lies in the ability to transcend the ego and live in harmony with others. Jesus is also seen as the one who reveals the spiritual laws that govern the universe. His teaching about the kingdom of God, for example, is not just a matter of religious faith, but a deep spiritual knowledge of the true nature of the human being and the relationship with the divine. Jesus' humility, when he was born in a simple place and lived among the poor and marginalized, reflects the idea that true spiritual greatness does not lie in material riches, but in detachment and service to others. Within the Spiritist vision, Jesus' divinity is not limited to what he represented in the past, but also to the continuity of his spiritual influence on humanity. In other words, Jesus' mission, even after his physical departure, remains a beacon of spiritual instruction. His presence is not restricted to his incarnation on earth, but extends to higher spiritual planes, where he continues to guide souls seeking elevation. In a broader context, the divinity of Jesus is also linked to the process of spiritual evolution. He came not only to save, but to teach that spiritual evolution is a continuous path and that all human beings, through the practice of good, love and truth, can reach a higher level of spirituality. Therefore, his divinity lies in the ability to guide humanity to a better future, of healing, balance, and spiritual perfection. Jesus' divinity can also be seen in his direct connection to God, not just in a sense of biological fatherhood, but in a spiritual and cosmic bond. The idea that Jesus is the Son of God can be interpreted as the ultimate expression of a spirit that is aligned with divine laws, that acted with total purity of intention and that deeply understood the will of God. In this context, Jesus' divinity is a reflection of the perfection of his soul, his deep connection with the divine plane, and the role he plays as a mediator between the earthly and spiritual planes. As discussed in Humberto de Campos' text, the spiritual legions that gave themselves without resistance to the son of the murdered sovereign highlight an important aspect of Jesus' divinity, his spiritual authority. This is not an imposed or military authority, but an authority that comes from the spiritual perception of the legions that Jesus, in fact, represents the manifestation of divine laws, and that his arrival on earth would mean a cosmic transformation, with repercussions not only in humanity, but also in the spiritual world. This view of spiritual legions reinforces the idea that Jesus, as a manifestation of divinity, has power not only over human beings, but also over spirits in other spheres of existence. He is seen as a central figure in the harmony of the universe, and his arrival on earth was awaited by these legions as a point of cosmic renewal, where all spiritual forces would align with the purpose of love and evolution. In Spiritism, the idea that Jesus was, and still is, a spirit of very high evolution implies that his presence transcends the limits of matter and reaches all spiritual planes. He is seen as a cosmic messenger, whose actions go beyond the physical world, influencing the higher spiritual planes with his mission. In this sense, Jesus is described not only as a human being who has undergone earthly experience, but as an eternal spirit, whose influence continues to benefit the spiritual worlds and incarnated beings. Jesus' divinity is not just a matter of his identity as the Son of God, but is a reflection of his higher spiritual nature. He is the ultimate model of spiritual evolution, a being whose incarnation on earth was part of a cosmic plan to promote humanity's progress. His presence and mission on earth represented the coming of a perfect spirit, whose teaching and example are still alive today, influencing both human beings and spiritual legions on their journey of elevation and improvement. The existence of Jesus is a deeply debated topic and approached from different perspectives, and in the spiritual and philosophical texts you shared, the vision about this existence goes beyond the human story of a religious leader to explore a deep spiritual aspect, reflecting his mission cosmic and its divine nature. According to the traditional view of history, the existence of Jesus is confirmed by Christian sources and other historical records of his time. He was born around 4 to 6 BC in the region of Judea, during the rule of Herod, and his life was marked by his mission to preach the coming of the kingdom of God, in addition to his crucifixion and resurrection. However, when analyzing the existence of Jesus within Spiritism and spiritual doctrines, his existence is understood not only from a historical or physical point of view, but also as a transcendental spiritual reality. In the spiritual and spiritist context, Jesus is seen as an immortal spirit, with an existence that transcends time and space. He is not considered just a person with a life limited to a historical period on earth, but rather as an eternal being, who has always existed and will continue to exist as part of the divine plan. Your divine mission is not limited to the moment of your incarnation in a human body, but is part of a cosmic and spiritual function that encompasses all epochs and dimensions of existence. The Spiritist view is that Jesus was already a highly evolved spirit before his incarnation. His arrival on earth, therefore, is not a creation of God at a specific moment, but the manifestation of a spirit that, throughout its evolution, reached such a degree of spiritual perfection that it became a model for humanity. Jesus is considered as a being whose existence transcends physical death. His life on earth was only a temporary incarnation, but his spiritual essence continues to exist, influencing both incarnated humans and beings in the spiritual world. According to works such as those of André Luis and Ramatis, the existence of Jesus has a cosmic dimension. His coming to earth was not a historical coincidence or an isolated event, but rather part of a greater divine plan designed to promote the spiritual evolution of humanity. Mediator between God and men, Jesus is seen as a cosmic mediator, a bridge between human beings and universal laws. He was sent to teach humanity about love, mercy, and the true nature of the kingdom of God, which is not a physical place but a spiritual condition of harmony and perfection. Jesus' mission, according to this perspective, involves both his incarnation and his eternal spiritual presence, which continues to act on human souls. Jesus' mission, in spiritual understanding, was to promote cosmic renewal. He not only came to transform the hearts of human beings, but also to harmonize the spiritual forces of the universe. His presence on earth marked a great change on the spiritual plane, influencing both human beings and the spiritual legions that guide the progress of the worlds. In many spiritual texts, including those of André Luis and other spirits, the existence of Jesus is seen as being of a transcendent nature, not restricted to the physical plane of earth, but having influence over the spiritual world. After his crucifixion and resurrection, Jesus ascended to a higher plane, but his presence remains active and he follows the progress of humanity and his followers in the spiritual world. Jesus and the spiritual legions. An important aspect of the Spiritist view of the existence of Jesus is his relationship with the spiritual legions. He is described as a cosmic leader, whose example and teachings are followed not only by human beings, but also by high spirits acting on other planes of existence. His mission is not restricted to Earth, but extends to a cosmic level, where he guides and illuminates spirits in different spheres of existence. The presence of Jesus on higher planes. In several spiritual works, such as Our Home and Missionaries of Light, the presence of Jesus on spiritual planes is seen as a benefactor and guiding force. He is portrayed as a central figure in the processes of healing, renewal and evolution of spirits who, after death, seek his spiritual assistance. He guides souls to free themselves from their imperfections and draw closer to God. Another aspect that emerges from these spiritual works is the idea that Jesus' existence is not limited to his human incarnation, but that he already existed as a spirit before being born on earth. He, as a pure spirit, came to earth to fulfill a specific mission, but his story as a spirit begins long before his incarnation in a human body. This spirit, over millennia, was prepared to assume its mission of teaching and exemplifying divine love. In some texts, he is described as a cosmic soul, a manifestation of universal wisdom. His coming to earth was a spiritual and not accidental decision, as part of divine planning that aimed to bring luminosity and spiritual transformation to humanity. The spiritual view of Jesus' existence also reflects the idea that he represents not only the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth, but the energy of the universal Christ, a cosmic and divine force that acts on the entire universe. This idea suggests that Jesus is a manifestation of divine will, and his existence cannot be understood simply as an isolated human incarnation, but as the constant presence of a superior spiritual force acting at all times. In Spiritist texts, the existence of Jesus is also seen as the beginning of a new spiritual era for humanity. His arrival on earth marks the moment when divine teachings began to be revealed in a clearer and more accessible way to human beings, preparing them for higher spiritual evolution. The advent of Jesus on earth brought with it a new understanding of divine laws, universal love, and the true nature of the human being. Its existence brought the understanding that humanity must seek not only material improvement, but also spiritual growth. Jesus thus inaugurated a new era of spirituality, in which love for others and the search for truth are the main pillars. The existence of Jesus, as explored in spiritual texts and Spiritist doctrine, is much more than the story of a man born in Judea. He is seen as a cosmic spirit, who already existed before his incarnation and whose mission was to manifest himself on earth to promote universal spiritual renewal. His presence transcends the limits of time and space, with an eternal influence, both in the physical and spiritual worlds. He is the expression of a divine and universal love, a living and active presence, which continues to guide humanity, not only in its historical time, but also in all spiritual planes that exist. The descent of Jesus to earth is a profound and multifaceted concept that involves both the manifestation of a divine being on a material plane and the fulfillment of a cosmic and spiritual mission. In the context of spiritual texts, the descent of Jesus is understood not only as a historical event, but as a divine and planned act, essential for the spiritual transformation of humanity and the harmonization of the universe. Let's explore aspects of this descent in detail. Jesus, as an immortal and highly evolved spirit, already had a cosmic and spiritual mission before his incarnation. His descent to earth was not an accident or a simple personal choice, but rather a planned spiritual decision that aimed to fulfill a greater purpose, to transform humanity, reveal divine love, and teach true spiritual laws. In spiritual texts, it is emphasized that Jesus was not a simple human being, but a divine spirit who possessed a higher consciousness. He had already lived many spiritual experiences before taking on a physical body, and his mission to descend to earth was linked to a universal divine plan that aimed at the salvation and spiritual elevation of all human beings. Jesus is seen as the intermediary between God and humanity. His descent to earth is described as an act of mercy and an outpouring of divine love. He came to teach humanity about unconditional love, charity, and the true laws of God. He would be the perfect model of behavior for all human beings, a guide to moral and spiritual perfection. Jesus' descent to earth was not a random event, but something meticulously planned by superior spiritual beings. In many Spiritist works, such as those by André Luis and Ramatis, it is described that the incarnation of Jesus was a decision taken on the spiritual plane, where elevated entities coordinated his arrival in order to carry out a greater plan for humanity. The incarnation of Jesus was the result of a divine plan that involved many other spirits and cosmic forces. He did not come down to earth in isolation, but within a larger spiritual context, where other entities helped prepare the ground for his coming and influenced the historical events that preceded his mission. According to Ramatis and other spirits, Jesus' descent was accompanied by spiritual legions who had the mission of assisting and protecting his incarnation. These legions not only cared for Jesus while he was on earth, but they also worked to ensure that his message was disseminated and received effectively by those who were willing to listen and learn. Before his coming to earth, Jesus went through a long process of spiritual preparation, where he evolved on different planes until he reached the spiritual perfection necessary to carry out his mission on earth. This preparation process is seen as essential to their ability to endure incarnation in a human body, with all the physical and emotional limitations that this entailed. In the Spiritist context, Jesus was not created perfect, but he was a soul in constant evolution, who reached a degree of purity and unique wisdom through many existences on different spiritual planes. His arrival on earth was, therefore, the culmination of an evolutionary process, in which he prepared himself to play a fundamental role in the spiritual development of humanity. The coming of Jesus also required the preparation of the environment where he would be born and fulfill his mission. Judea, at the time of his birth, was going through a period of great political, social, and spiritual upheaval, and this was seen as an opportunity for the manifestation of the new spiritual era that Jesus would bring. The superior spirituality, which coordinated this process, knew that the moment was ripening for its arrival. When we talk about Jesus' descent to earth, we are referring to his incarnation, the moment in which this immortal spirit assumed a physical body. According to the Spiritist doctrine and other spiritual teachings, Jesus was conceived through a spiritual process that involved the action of high spirits and divine intervention, with the objective of creating a perfect body for the spirit that would be incarnated there. The idea that Jesus' body was prepared in a special way does not imply that he was exempt from human challenges, but rather that he was endowed with a physical constitution suitable for the divine mission he was to fulfill. This spiritual purity of Jesus is often associated with his immunity to error and sin, as he was not subject to the physical and moral limitations of other human beings. Even though he was spiritually perfect, Jesus was, however, completely human in his incarnation. He experienced human suffering, doubts, and emotional challenges, not because he was imperfect, but to exemplify the overcoming of these spiritual challenges. His suffering was seen as a conscious sacrifice for the love of humanity, aiming to teach human beings how to deal with life's adversities. The main reason for Jesus' descent to earth was to fulfill his mission of spiritual transformation of humanity. Jesus did not come just to teach, but to demonstrate through his life the true path of spiritual elevation. One of the central messages of Jesus' mission was that love is the fundamental principle that governs the universe. Through his actions and teachings, he exemplified how people can live in harmony with spiritual laws. Jesus taught that salvation lies in the practice of love for others and mercy, as opposed to legalism and selfishness. Jesus' descent to earth is also linked to his mission to free humanity from sin. Not in the traditional sense of guilt, but in the sense of spiritual ignorance and moral imperfection. He came to teach that all human beings have the ability to transform themselves and achieve redemption through inner change. After fulfilling his mission on earth, Jesus ascended to heaven, an event described as a return to the spiritual plane that he never stopped being part of. His ascension symbolizes not only the end of his incarnation, but also the continuity of his spiritual presence in the world, now at a higher level. Jesus' ascension does not mean the end of his mission, but the beginning of a new spiritual process in which he continues to act, now in a more universal and accessible way, guiding humanity and spirits through the ages. Jesus' descent to earth was a unique event in the spiritual history of humanity, marked by a cosmic divine plan that involved both his incarnation and his mission of spiritual transformation. Jesus was not just a historical figure, but a divine and immortal being who became human to teach the path of salvation and spiritual elevation. His presence on earth was and continues to be a cosmic force that transcends the limits of time and space, influencing not only human beings, but also the elevated spirits that follow him and assist in carrying out his mission. The transformative role of Jesus is one of the deepest and most essential concepts within Christian and Spiritist spirituality. Jesus was not just a spiritual leader or a moral teacher, he is seen as a cosmic and divine figure, whose presence on earth not only brought moral and ethical teachings, but also initiated a process of profound and universal transformation for humanity. The objective of his mission on earth was to transform human beings, elevate their spiritual understanding and guide them to a life in accordance with divine laws. Jesus is considered the perfect model of moral and spiritual life, and his mission was, in large part, to transform human consciousness, showing a path of redemption and spiritual evolution. His life, actions, and teachings were an invitation to internal change, to the process of overcoming human imperfections and the transformation of deep spiritual values. Love is the fundamental principle that guides the transformation of human beings. Jesus taught, in a practical and profound way, that unconditional love for God and others is the key to true spiritual transformation. He exemplified this by showing love even for those who persecuted and crucified him, reinforcing that forgiveness and mercy are essential to overcome the limits of selfishness and violence. Jesus' message also proposed freedom from selfishness and materialism, challenging people not to become attached to material goods and earthly concerns. He spoke about the kingdom of heaven, a spiritual reality that transcends the physical world, and that could only be achieved through inner transformation, which occurs through the practice of humility, renunciation, and purity of heart. Jesus also transformed the way humanity understands suffering. While many see suffering as a punishment or a fatality, Jesus brought the idea that suffering is a means of purification and an opportunity for spiritual growth. He himself went through great physical and emotional suffering, but his attitude towards it was one of forgiveness, acceptance, and resilience, showing that it is possible to transform pain into learning and evolution. The transformation promoted by Jesus was not only limited to the moral and spiritual sphere, but also had a tangible and practical impact on people's lives, physically and emotionally. He performed miraculous cures and restored people's lives, whether curing illnesses, restoring the senses, or even resurrecting the dead. These miracles, in the Spiritist understanding, are not just supernatural events, but signs of a profound transformation, which involve the healing of souls and the spiritual restoration of individuals. Jesus' miracles are described not just as physical healings, but as moments of spiritual healing. It restored health, but at the same time it offered a new outlook on life, a new sense of purpose. Soul healing is the deepest and most lasting transformation, which involves the process of self-improvement and self-knowledge. Another facet of the transformation brought by Jesus was the liberation of obsessive spirits, that is, those spirits that cause emotional and mental disturbances in those incarnate. By freeing people from their spiritual influences, Jesus showed that true transformation also involves purifying the being and restoring spiritual harmony. Jesus also played the role of bearer of universal truth. In many of the Gospels, he is identified as the way, the truth, and the life. His presence on earth brought a new vision about God, about eternal life, and about the nature of the human being. Jesus revealed a loving and merciful God, unlike the view of a vengeful and punitive God that prevailed in many earlier traditions. He showed that God is love and that all human beings are called to live in harmony with that love. This revelation was one of the greatest transformations that Jesus brought, as it completely changed the way people saw and related to divinity. The idea of salvation, or redemption, proposed by Jesus was not just the salvation of the physical body, but a spiritual elevation of the soul, a continuous process of growth and evolution. For Jesus, everyone is called to follow his example of love, charity, and truth to achieve true salvation, which takes place in detachment from the ego and total surrender to the divine plan. Forgiveness and mercy were two of Jesus' greatest legacies. He not only taught these virtues, but practiced them in an exemplary manner throughout his life. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus highlighted the importance of forgiving your enemies and not returning evil for evil. Forgiveness, in Jesus, is seen as a tool of liberation for both the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. Forgiving is an act of detachment from the ego, releasing resentment and moral elevation. By practicing forgiveness, human beings transcend the cycle of pain and revenge and open space for inner healing and spiritual reconciliation. Jesus' mercy was manifested in his willingness to welcome those marginalized in society, such as sinners, prostitutes, the sick and the excluded. He demonstrated that mercy is love in action, capable of transforming lives and rescuing people from spiritual loneliness and moral despair. In addition to his action on the physical plane, Jesus also exerts a transforming influence in the spiritual world. His ascension and presence on the higher spiritual plane mean that his energy and teachings continue to act in a transformative way on disembodied souls. Spirits from different spiritual spheres can be touched by your divine light and guided by your wisdom. In the spiritual world, Jesus is seen as an intercessor, someone who helps spirits in the process of rediscovering divine love, helping them to rise and reconcile themselves with the light of God. It plays a guiding role, both for the incarnate and the disembodied, bringing hope, healing and redemption. The transforming presence of Jesus is not limited to earth. Its cosmic mission encompasses the evolution of all spiritual beings, influencing all dimensions of the universe and allowing everyone to follow the path of perfection. Its message transcends time and space, always being available to those who seek to live according to divine laws. The transformative role of Jesus is therefore multifaceted and encompasses all spheres of human and spiritual existence. He came to earth to teach the true path of love, charity, forgiveness, and mercy. His life was a living demonstration of how inner transformation can lead to spiritual redemption. He heals spiritual wounds, restores life, teaches the truth and, in the end, shows the path to continuous evolution, both on earth and in the spiritual world. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Your subscription is very important to us and helps us bring more quality content about the transformative power of Jesus and other spiritual teachings. Share with your friends and help spread these messages of love and transformation.